And good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are around the world. I am Marcus Holmes, and I am excited to bring you yet another Black History Month moment. We've been doing these moments all month long, and we will continue to do them through the end of the month, although we recognize that we are Black 365 or 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We are Black. But we know that in our Love and Stuff community and the greater community, there are so many different wonderful ethnicities and people. We want to celebrate and to laud and to reflect on the accomplishments, the brilliance, the intelligence, the creative spirit, the indomitable spirit, the sacrifice of persons of African American and African descent. So we continue our look. So whether you are watching us on LinkedIn, or if you're watching us on Facebook on the Marcus R. Holmes page or the Love and Stuff page, whether you're watching us on the HR Passion page, on YouTube or Twitch TV, we're grateful that you're here. And we hope that you will drop in the comments your name and where you are around the world. We realize the Love and Stuff community is a smaller community, but with good reach. And I'm just excited to have people from different places. So I love to look in the comments and see where you're from. So if you don't mind just dropping in the comments where you are and maybe what the temperature is like there. Here we have too many inches of snow for me to try to count, but gratefully most of it has been moved so we can navigate. Our hearts are going out to those in the U.S. Out west who don't traditionally receive this kind of cold or snow, and many of them that are without power. So we're thinking of you, especially in the Texas area and other areas where people are contending with snow. For them is really, really a tough way to navigate. So I'm going to go right into, all right, I'm just looking across platforms. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you will click share and tag someone to join in the presentation. We will continue our look at public figures today, and we will continue that through the end of the week. And next week, we will go into the arts, largely into the music of many of the great people in the African American experience. I believe the music is next week. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go right into tonight's presentation. So thank you for your patience. Constance Baker Motley was an unlikely civil rights hero. An African American who grew up near Yale University, she did not personally experience overt racism until late in high school. And as a young person, she was almost totally unaware of Black history. After a childhood largely free of overt racism, Motley experienced Jim Crow laws firsthand while traveling by train to a college in Tennessee. In Cincinnati, Motley was ordered into an aging, rusty car marked colored. She wrote of the experience, quote, "Although I had known this would happen, I was both frightened and humiliated. All I knew for sure was that I could do nothing about this new reality," unquote. Constance Baker Motley, September 14, 1921, born September 14, 1921, was a key strategist of the African American civil rights movement. She was a lawyer, a judge, a state senator, and a borough president of Manhattan, New York City. She argued 12 landmark civil rights cases in front of the Supreme Court, winning 9. She was a law clerk to Thurgood Marshall, aiding him in the case of Brown versus the Board of Education. Constance was born in 1921 in New Haven, Connecticut, the 9th of 12 children. Her parents, Rachel Huggins and McCullough Alva Baker, were immigrants from the Caribbean islands. Before coming to the United States, Rachel worked as a seamstress and a teacher while McCullough worked as a cobbler. Baker Motley describes her parents' education of being equivalent to the 10th grade in the United States. Her mother was a domestic worker and her father worked as a chef for different Yale University student societies, including the secret society of Skulls and Bones. Rachel Baker was a founder of the New Haven NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, exposing Motley to African American history, especially the writings of W.E.B. Du Bois, in her Sunday school. While in high school, Motley became president of the New Haven Negro Youth Council and was secretary of the New Haven Adult Community Council. In 1939, she graduated with honors from Hills House High School. Though she had already formed a desire to practice law, Motley lacked the means to attend college and instead went to work for the National Youth Administration. She also continued her involvement in community activities. It was through this work that she encountered local businessman and philanthropist Clarence W. Blakesley, who, after hearing Motley speak at a New Haven community center, offered to pay for her education. With Blakesley's financial help, she started college at Fisk University, a historically Black college in Nashville, Tennessee, but later returned north to attend New York University. At NYU, she obtained her Bachelor's of Arts degree in 1943, and Motley received her Bachelor's of Laws in 1946 from Columbia Law School. In October of 1945, during her second year at law school, future U.S. Supreme Court Associate Justice Thurgood Marshall hired her as a law clerk. She was assigned to work on court-martial cases that were filed after World War II. Richard Blum says, a former clerk who helped Motley research her autobiography, she was very admiring of Thurgood Marshall, extremely appreciative of him hiring her. He had no issue with her being a woman, unquote. Along the way, she experienced countless courtroom delays and indignities. Motley kept her cool, even as some judges turned their backs when she spoke. In her autobiography, Motley says she was never discouraged by doubts concerning her background. She writes, quote, "I was the kind of person who would not be put down. I rejected any notion that my race or sex would bar my success in life," unquote. Constance Baker married Joel Motley Jr., a real estate and insurance broker, in 1946 at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in New Haven, Connecticut. They were married for 49 years. From the late 40s through the early 60s, Motley played a pivotal role in the fight to end racial discrimination, putting her own safety at risk in one racial power keg after another. After graduating from Columbia University, a law school rather, Baker was hired by the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund as a civil rights attorney. As the fund's first female attorney, she became associate counsel to the fund, making her a lead trial attorney in a number of early and significant civil rights cases, which included representing the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Freedom Riders, and the Birmingham Children Marchers. Baker visited churches that were firebombed, sang freedom songs, and visited Dr. Martin Luther King while he sat in jail, as well as spending a night with civil rights activist Medgar Evers under armed guard. As a frontline lawyer for the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, Motley personally led the litigation that integrated the universities of Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, among others, overcoming Southern governors who literally barred the door to African American students. She opened up schools and parks to African Americans and successfully championed the rights of minorities to protest peacefully. In 1950, She wrote the original complaint in the case of Brown versus Board of Education, the first African American woman ever to argue a case before the United States Supreme Court. In Meredith versus Fair, she won James Meredith's effort to be the first Black student to attend the University of Mississippi in 1962. Motley was successful in 9 of the 10 cases she argued before the Supreme Court. The 10th decision regarding jury composition was eventually overturned in her favor. She was otherwise a key legal strategist in the civil rights movement, helping to desegregate Southern schools, Southern buses, and Southern lunch counters. Beyond her work with the Legal Defense Fund, Motley continued her civil rights work as an elected official. In 1964, she was elected to the New York State Senate and devoted much of her time to advocating for housing equality for majority Black and Latino low-income tenants. Motley also endorsed urban renewal projects and looked to improve the neighborhoods in New York City that needed aid. Motley was elected on February 4th, 1964, to the state Senate to fill the vacancy caused by the election of James Lopez Watson to the New York City Civil Court. She was the first African American woman to sit in the state Senate. She took her seat in the 174th New York State Legislature, was reelected in November 1964 to the 175th Legislature, and resigned her seat when she was chosen on February 23rd, 1965, as the Manhattan Borough President, the first woman in such a position. In November of 1965, she was elected to succeed herself for a full 4-year term. J. Raymond Jones was influential in helping her to reach these positions. Motley was nominated by President Lyndon B. Johnson on January 26, 1966, to a seat on the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York, vacated by Judge Archie Owen Dawson. Senator James Eastland of Mississippi delayed Constance Baker Motley's confirmation process for 7 months. He was in opposition to Baker's past desegregation work, including Brown versus Board of Education and Meredith versus Fair. Senator Eastland used his influence as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee to disrupt Baker's nomination and went as far as accusing her of being a member of the Communist Party. Despite opposition, she was confirmed by the United States Senate on August 30 of 1966 and received her commission, becoming the first African American female federal judge. She served as chief judge from 1982 to 1986. She assumed senior status on September 30 of 1986. Motley was the presiding judge on the case of Blank versus Sullivan and Cromwell, a landmark case for women lawyers. In Blank, the plaintiffs accused a law firm of sexual discrimination. Due to the nature of this case and Motley's gender and race, there were calls for Motley to withdraw from the case, assuming she would be biased. In response, Motley pointed to her history of impartial decisions, sometimes ruling against the plaintiff in discrimination cases. In Belknap versus Leary, another highly publicized case, Judge Motley admonished the New York City police for not providing veteran war protesters with adequate protection against violence in the streets. Constance Baker Motley ruled against the plaintiff in the case of Malarkey versus Borglum in 1970. This case involved female tenants in New York City arguing that their male landlord was violating their First and 14th Amendment rights. The defendant cited the landlord's overreach of power, but failed to detail the landlord's legal failings. Motley ruled in favor of the defendant, rejecting the plaintiff's claim of sexual discrimination and going against her former advocacy for tenants during her time in the New York State Senate. Motley handed down a breakthrough decision for women in sports broadcasting in 1978 when she ruled that a female reporter must be allowed into a Major League Baseball locker room. In Lutke versus Khan, Melissa Lutke filed a lawsuit against Bowie Khan, the Major League Baseball commissioner. The American League president, Leland McPhail, and three New York City officers, all involved in the suit over the New York Yankees' gendered policy forbidding female sports reports from entering the Yankees locker room. She received numerous awards. She received a Candace Award for Distinguished Service from the National Coalition of 100 Black Women in 1984. In 1993, she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. And in 2001, President Bill Clinton awarded her the President's Citizen Medal. The NAACP, awarded her the Springer Medal, the organization's highest honor, in 2003. Motley was a prominent honorary member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. In early 2006, she was honored by Senators Charles Schumer and Hillary Clinton with a Congressional Gold Medal posthumously. As Motley had a distinguishing career in civil rights, the senator only thought it fitting to award her. During the early 21st century, Motley became a part of the Just the Beginning Foundation, a foundation dedicated to preserving African American judges who improve the African American community through their work. During her time as a federal judge for the Southern District of New York, she made efforts to reach out to other African American women in her position. One of the women she reached out to was Judge Ann Thompson, who received a personal note from Motley on the day she was appointed to be a judge for the District of New Jersey. Vice President Kamala Harris explicitly cited Constance Baker Motley's influence on her own political and law career on her campaign page. An award-winning biographical documentary, Justice is a Black Woman, The Life and Work of Constance Baker Motley, was first broadcast on Connecticut Public Television in 2012. A documentary short, The Trials of Constance Baker Motley, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival on April 2015. She was revered by the many judges and clerks she mentored. In 1998, Motley published an autobiography, Equal Justice Under the Law. On one subject, she revealed her inner fire, the sting of racial discrimination. While juggling discrimination cases and desegregation cases, Motley occasionally represented Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In her autobiography, she recalled visiting King in a stench-ridden jail outside Americus, Georgia. She writes, quote, "The temperature must have been 100 degrees. We could hear other prisoners in a back room yelling and moaning. It was then I realized that we did indeed have a new civil rights leader, a man willing to die for our freedom," unquote. And perhaps her most famous case, Motley, with the backing of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, helped James Meredith gain enrollment at the University of Mississippi. Campus riots broke out when Meredith registered, killing 2 people. Federal troops were called in to restore order. The threat of violence was constant during Motley's trips to the South. Barred from hotels, Motley stayed with local rights activists. Even when armed men stood watch, she found it difficult to sleep. One frequent host, Mississippi civil rights leader Medgar Evers, was fatally shot in his driveway. The assassin hid behind a large hedge that Motley had urged Evers to cut down. Away from the courthouse, Motley found solace in an 18th century Connecticut farmhouse where she and her husband Joel relaxed and invited friends for weekend visits. It was an old rustic house. You could walk into the fireplace, Judge Ann Thompson writes, It was in the woods and she loved it. Even as Motley prepared her autobiography, she stayed characteristically humble about her legacy. Bloom writes, who assisted her with the biography, she felt very lucky, like she was in the right place at the right time. The civil rights movement was the movement of an era. It changed our nation's history. She died on September 28th, 2005, of congestive heart failure. Her funeral was held at the Connecticut church where she had been married. A public memorial was held at Riverside Church in Manhattan. So there are heroes who are sometimes greatly sung, like Thurgood Marshall. You hear that name and you know exactly who he was, and maybe some history about him, and maybe not as much about Constance Baker Motley outside of legal circles. But she was a first in many regards. And so I am so honored to be able to pay tribute to her as our Black History Moment today. I happen to know some outstanding Black judges and Black women attorneys, and they are brilliant, and they are many of the same attributes that have been written about the late Constance Baker Motley. And so I am just excited to be able to share a little bit about her and hopefully enlighten some of you. Our Black History Moments will be every day for the next 12 or so days, and I hope that you will join us for each one of them at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, as we close out this month on February 28th at 6 o'clock p.m., we will have a culmination of the entire month, which will include literary works, music, and you name it, oration, writings. I don't want you to miss it. It will be at 6 p.m. It will be broadcast through Restream on Facebook Live, as well as LinkedIn Live, as well as Twitch TV and YouTube events, just to celebrate the amazing history and the amazing struggle and the amazing brilliance and ingenuity that African Americans and people of African descent have brought to this great melting pot that we call America. And I hope that as you consider all of these moments, that you find greater appreciation for the value of the diversity that really enriches our tapestry of democracy and freedom. I'm Marcus Holmes. Thank you for this Black History Month moment. I'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Just going to check the comments real quick. Thank you, Mahasan, on Facebook. Thank you, those that are on LinkedIn. Have a grateful evening and see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time.